Hello, my name is Drew and I'm the Aspiring Master, and welcome to the Aspiring Master Presents. This is a show where we talk about the meanings, misunderstandings, and insights about the important words we use and misuse on a daily basis. Really understanding what we're truly meaning when we talk allows us to convey and explain ourselves better to others. This not only allows us clearer communication so we can get what we need quicker and with less stress, but also helps us understand ourselves in more depth than we thought possible. On this show, I welcome back my special guests, Talia Wilson and Kim Robinson, who, like myself, are enthusiastic advocates for personal growth and cooperative awareness. Today, we're going to go into the second episode on grief. So let's get to it. You were talking about judgment, like releasing judgment. Oh God, I wish I could do that. And I differentiate. I go, judgment is a good thing. We need discernment. We need to be able to judge a situation and move forward to who we are trying to be in that moment, right? Like I want to be compassionate and wonderful and empathetic in that moment. So I have to judge a situation and find out, okay, if I was compassionate and compassionate and don't have any condemnation on anybody, where would I move as the person that I want to be in every given second? But when we condemn people with that judgment, I think that we have to discern. Judgment is a really good thing. We need that discernment in order to be able to protect ourselves in dangerous situations. We need to be able to judge where we need to go on a compassionate level too. We have to have that kind of judgment in our lives as people, and we do it every day. It's the condemnation, you are less than me, to make myself feel better. That's
or even in the stages of grief too, right?
Yes.
Like you get judged on that. When my mom passed away, like I said, I mourned for losing her for 3 weeks before she died. And when she died, like I said, it was a relief. And I was so tired of crying. I was so tired of feeling like I couldn't catch my breath, or just that big lump in my throat that wouldn't go away. And all I wanted to do was just go out and have a good time. I just wanted to forget about it. I just want to just go out for one night, just give me one night of like laughter and friends. So it was a friend of mine's birthday. So I went there. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go and have a few drinks and have a good time. Right. And the minute I walked into the pub, everyone was like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I know.
And then I was just like, this is so not where I wanted to, what I need right now is to not talk about my mom, because I've just lived through it. I just need a distraction. I just wanted that distraction. And that's when I met my best friend, Esty, and she was celebrating her mom's birthday on the day my mom died. And she was there with her mom and her sisters. And I just moved over to her table, and they had me laughing so hard that my cheeks hurt. I almost peed my pants. Like it was the perfect night. And I so needed that. Like I just so needed that. And don't get me wrong, like I still grieved my mom after that. And her and I are like the closest we've ever been, because since then she's lost her mom. And it's kind of like, what did she say? She goes, this is a club I never wanted to be part of. Like now you understand, like it's like an epiphany, like when you lose somebody close to you, and you're trying to be empathetic, but you can't until you're there. And then once you're there, you're like, oh crap, like now I know what you were saying back then when you said, don't call me and bitch about your mom. Because you have a mom, right? Call somebody with mom and complain about them, right? So yeah. And going back to what I was saying about my dad, I just feel like I was lucky. And when we come back to this whole gratitude, like I'm lucky to have had him for the 19 years that I had him, because he taught me so much and I got so much out of it, like in molding me into the person that I am, that I'm so forever grateful. And yeah, maybe I didn't, Father's Days were tough for a few years. After that, I would avoid people or situations just so that I didn't have to, participate. But well, yeah, no, I wouldn't change any of it.
I think that sorry, go ahead.
That's it.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I think that when we're dealing, one of the things that you brought up was when we're dealing with somebody else's grief, This is really important to one. I think that Brene Brown's got some really good advice on this, and I like her stuff. Is to not try and place your own understanding of grief or your own idea of what you think that this person might be feeling. But again, there is. I'm sure that somebody that out there is condemning people. What you should be doing this, right? Like anytime you hear a should, there's a condemnation in there, and like you should be reacting like this. But walking in and saying, listen, that's totally not what I need right now. I don't need you to go, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't approach people that have lost something. I approach them on the level that they're at right. Wherever they are, right? Like, I mean, I really work at on a judgment level to try and find where they're at in their life. And I, of course, some people would call me brutally honest. And I'm not brutally honest. I'm just very honest about who I am and where I'm coming from, right?
You sure about that?
Yeah. Well, and dealing with death, you have to say, I don't come at people and say, oh, I'm so sorry, right?
I mean, that's the natural response, right?
Well,
if something like you are sorry, like I am sorry.
It's what we were trained to do. Absolutely. Right? I'm not sure if it's the natural one. I think the natural
your
one.
Relationship, I think, with that person, right? Like if it's somebody who I'm really close to, like SD, I'm just gonna listen. I'm just there, right? Like you can vent, you can yell, you can scream, you can cry your face off. Like I just want you to know you're not alone, and I'm there for you, no matter what stage you're in. Like it doesn't matter, right? And there is an empathy because I have lost myself, and those relationships are completely different to her relationships, right? Especially with her mom, because she, her mom lived with her. Right. So she was way closer. Yeah. Then, when I lost my mom, we haven't lived together for 20 years, right? So big difference.
Well, I mean, I think that when you're approaching anybody that's grieving, we have an uncomfortableness, I think, in us. Yeah. And so we go back on, and we travel and we just go back on those, well, I'm just praying for you, or, like all of the little platitudes that a lot of people in grief just don't want to hear, right? Whether we like it or not, yeah, of course, sometimes they want somebody with them, and other times they just want everybody to just F off, right? And being present with them. And I'm going to use that as a statement. When you are present with somebody, when you are not trying your own agenda, and it's really tough to do, because it's being able to walk into a situation knowing that this had happened and not being scared of it, because I think that we get scared of it and we start doing the whole platitude thing of, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not sorry. I'm empathetic. Right? I want to be there where they need me to be, as opposed to where I think I need to be. Right?
Yeah, it was like when Grandma's funeral, honey, when we went to that, because he'd only met my grandma a couple times and didn't know her that well, and then it got to where she didn't remember him. So, but yeah, he walks into the funeral. He sang Ave Maria. He'd never met a lot of the relatives that had been there. So this was their first exposure to my husband. And at the same time, Mom got up and spoke, my dad got up and spoke, and then I spoke, and I ended up making all but one of my mom's cousins cry, And then at the same time, Drew comes back out and tells us a little anecdote about talking to Grandma when she didn't remember him and stuff. And so he could, relate to everybody without really relating to them in a way. And it was great. It was really great, because he was able to, pay his own tribute to my grandma without having to entrench himself in all that grief.
I think
really nice to be around at that time.
Was it the last time or the second last time that we went into her home? And it was the first time you'd ever seen your grandma cry.
Oh, God.
Remember? And I was
Couldn't
sitting with
find
her,
she couldn't
and I
find
was
her
sitting in,
keys.
yeah,
Yeah.
she couldn't find her keys, and I was sitting with her, holding her hand, and she was talking to me, and she, and I was just there, right? I just totally was there understanding what she was saying. I can't find my keys. You don't, and her big thing before she started crying, she says, you don't know what it's like to be old. I hate just being old, right?
Yeah.
And she started crying, and I'm like getting emotional while I'm talking about it. And and I just was totally present with her, right? Just holding her hand and totally understanding. I know that if I were in that position, what I would feel. And there's a
You
certain,
say that, but you don't.
well, no, I know that, but there's a certain amount
You might,
that I
like, you might
understand.
have an inkling, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, like, but you don't know until you're there.
Absolutely not. But it's there. There is a difference in understanding and connecting.
Right.
When you're connecting emotionally with something, and I know that you know this, I know you both know this actually, and I'm trying to articulate it to be able to share it. Right? There is when you can empathetically be with somebody, even though you haven't experienced something, you can still equate it to something in your life. And you can also say, if I was sitting in a wheelchair, if I couldn't, go out and play badminton or play disc golf or whatever it is that I'm doing, right? If I couldn't do any of that stuff, it would be so frustrating, and I would feel, and nobody's talking to me, and I'm stuck in a home where people are ignoring me. I can put myself in that scenario and do it. Now, this is not to say this is not what I'm thinking while that's happening. I'm completely feeling what is going on, right? I'm just in a place where I'm feeling what's coming from this person
And
and
learning.
and allowing it to be there, accepting where it is and accepting what comes up with it. And on an empathetic level, that is a connection. It is being able to connect to this person, not the difference between empathy and sympathy is a really simple one for me. Sympathy is when it triggers something inside you that resonates to what they're resonating to, and you experience that pain that they're expressing as if it was your own. That's sympathy. Empathy is being able to accept it and find the gratitude in it and share that. Share it with them in that moment without taking it on as if it was yours, right? And there is definitely something to be said to be able to sit. And I was honored, totally honored, by the way, that this woman who really had only met me a couple of times,
Yeah.
really opened up to me in that moment and shared what was really going on, right? Her sadness for being where she was, all of the stuff and people didn't understand her, and she couldn't understand people, and that shared understanding of being present with this woman and being, and the gratitude for me really at the time was that this person was able to, I was able to connect to this person, and there's a tremendous amount of trust that goes on in that situation. It's actually phenomenal to speak of. And it's
because
one
they're
of,
vulnerable. They're in such a
absolutely.
vulnerable state.
Well, and we all are, and I think that
And then we
miss
can
that.
just show our own vulnerability and not,
Absolutely.
and not be like, oh, what are they gonna say because I'm being vulnerable?
It's not about me, right? And that I think that that's where we go wrong, is that we equate it
about ourselves.
all about me, about how I'm feeling and how I should feel, right? We're trying to second guess what we should be doing, right? As opposed to being authentically ourselves. And sometimes authentically ourselves is avoiding it, not going there, whatever that is for each person, right? Again, I don't condemn people for choosing not to. Like, I mean, I see people do it all the time, is they go, well, she wasn't at the funeral, obviously she doesn't care, right? Like, I mean, and that kind of condemnation that happens is not, one, it's not conducive to any kind of peace in our world, but it also is saying, well, it's all about me and you should react exactly like me. And like we were talking about earlier, we are all so supremely different, and how we handle grief is going to be different, and how that looks for us. They might stick in anger. They might stick in, like, now they're blaming all of us. That's not my problem. That's how they choose to do grief. And now I can choose to be a part of it or not be a part of it. right? I can say, hey, this isn't about me. It's about what they need to do,
Mm-hmm.
right?
There's a lot of avoidance I've witnessed as well, in losing, where people just like shut down emotionally, like just shut it out, like absolutely refuse to talk about it, because they feel if they talk about it, then that makes them vulnerable, and then they got to feel stuff that they probably don't want to feel, because it's heart-wrenching. Like grief is heart-wrenching, like when you lose someone or a pet or
anything, right? Grief is grief, and bereavement on mourning, as we talked about earlier. Like mourning is really the sort of the process of grief, I think, and so if you're in mourning, you're in the process of grieving, and we, having been raised differently, having different chemical makeups, being different genders, big time, right? We're going to deal with these things, differently, and hopefully we can get to a place where we stop condemning people. Again, judgment is good. Judgment is a discernment, and condemnation is self inflation, basically. When you are telling in contempt, right? Let's take an example. Say you're walking by a parent, right, in a grocery store, and their child's having a meltdown, and you go, "Oh, can't you control your kid?" Right? And we do it all the time, and I'm just as guilty of saying things like that in my mind too, right? Like, I mean, I don't ever get me wrong. I'm talking about all of us are doing it, and you never even think about it. But that's just saying, I'm better than you because I don't have kids. Ha ha ha! I don't have to do this, right? And making yourself feel better. Well, why do you need to make yourself feel better? That means
there's a great observation there, right?
Why do you need to make yourself feel better in order to feel better to condemn somebody else? And therein lies our letting go of that judgment about other people's grief and how they go through it, right?
And self-awareness too, like how you process, right? I've learned so much, like even through my friend, right? Like and going through her process and us talking as much as we have. Like I just wish, like I wish I had that insight when my mom passed away, like just the like I just love the way she's handling it, and she's so very self-aware and cognizant of how her family is dealing with their grief too, right? And the support. It's amazing. But I always, like, my dad definitely raised me to be an observer and be self-aware and watch my reactions to things, like, because that's the only control you have, is how you react to situations, right? And it served me, I think, really well, because I do sit back and go, oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that, right? Like, right. Oh, okay. It's been really cathartic, I think. Like very cathartic to go through this with her, and her relationship with her mom was so different than mine with my mom, right? Like, so it's a long road. It really is. Like, grief is a long road. It's not something that you just, oh, I'm done now, it's all good, like, let's move on. It never
leaves you. I mean, it just ask Talia.
Yeah.
Like, she still grieves over my first car, right?
Oh my God.
Like our bunny car, because it meant so much to her, right? And I mean, to me, I just go, it was a great car. I really enjoyed it and I really love it. And I hold that on to me. But she goes, oh, I really wish that we had that, right? And it's because of what it meant, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that at all. I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't do the same thing, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong just because I don't do it. Right? You loved our car. Yes, you did.
Yeah, I did.
And she loved the other two cars that she got after that. But here's the kicker. She misses all of those cars. Right?
Really?
Sort of.
Well, I mean, you said the red one.
I don't think it's the same level of grief though. Like,
I know it's not. But again, I'm equating I'm equating this situation, right, to say that we have light attachments and we have heavy attachments
Yeah.
that affect our lives in certain ways. And no matter what, we have attachments and we have those remembrances. And it's the same thing when it's even more important. When I think about my cat, and I call it my cat now. It's totally Talia's
It was his cat.
By the way. She's
Yeah.
like, but
I may have brought him to Canada, but he was Drew's cat.
yeah, all of a sudden it was my cat. And
But an animal's so different, Drew.
I know.
An animal, to lose a pet that you have bonded with, I think I mean, you know, and I don't have my own children. Like, I didn't birth my own children, but I have stepkids that I absolutely adore. But I equate it with that because we haven't had kids, like other three of us. I always equate it with like that emotional bond with a pet that loves you unconditionally and doesn't care if you had a crappy day or if you got fired from your job or you're an asshole in general, right? Like, doesn't care. It's gonna love you no matter what. Like, that is so hard to say goodbye to, almost. And I know I'll probably get chastised for saying this, but almost more than even humans, because humans can piss you off, right?
I'm going to agree with you on this, because one of the things that I talked to my Aunt Marta had four kids. Yeah. My Aunt Marta had four kids, and she came up one time, and she was Mormon, lived in Utah forever. Still, no, she doesn't live in Utah anymore. She lives in Oregon. So, but she had four kids, and we talked about it. She never had a really great relationship with her husband. Like, I mean, it wasn't really emotionally fulfilling. And I talked to her. I said, listen, I noticed the spacing of your kids. This is what I talked to my aunt about, by the way. Oh. Okay. Can you imagine having to sit and have a conversation with me? Anyway, so I'm talking to my aunt. This had to have been 20 years ago. And I was talking to her. I said, I noticed, and it sparked my mind. Do you think that you had your children the way that you had them? Because she had them just under 2 years apart, roughly, except for the last one, I think. And I said, do you think that you were trying to compensate for the lack of emotional support in your life? Because kids from the age of 0 to about 2-ish are your snuggle bunnies. They don't have any judgment on you. They accept you. You can open your heart completely to them and share something there. And I said, do you think that might have been because you weren't getting fed emotionally in your relationship?
Wow, that's really deep.
Yeah, I know, right?
I
know it's way too deep, but it equates to what you were talking about. Okay, when you have a pet, and a very, very young child who doesn't start reflecting things back at you yet, right? They just accept you completely.
Because that's all they know.
Right? Because it's all they know. With humans, they grow past that stage, whereas animals really don't. Animals accept you as who you are, no matter what. Now, you find a relationship with them. You know exactly how to scratch them that they love, right? You know exactly, you know when they face away from their tail away from you and they're just completely avoiding you. You know they want something and you're not giving it to them. So they have that limited emotional reaction, but they always come back. They're always not condemning you like people do, right? I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's just
you can. I think you can totally. Like when you were talking about that call or that meeting that you guys had, and that lady was still mourning her cat of 11 years ago. Like I get that. I totally get that.
I do too.
Yeah. I think we all do, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that we all crave a relationship like that with people, right? I think that if it would be great if, people could get mad, but they come back and they're there completely open-hearted and trusting and trustworthy and respected and respecting, right? We all kind of want that. And pets really give us a way to be able to have that relationship with a being, that connection with a being, right? That can reflect things and feels emotion and all of those things, right? I think that we all crave that with one another. That's a really tough place to get to with people because we still don't have that understanding of how to accept other people without reservation, without the condemnational judgment that we were talking about, right? You must be this way in order for me to like you. It's not necessarily true, right? I understand that I'm not going to be hanging out with a bunch of evangelical Christians because they are not going to look at me in favor because I'm agnostic, right?
Depends though.
Yeah,
if you have something in common with them, like art or whatever in common with them, and you stay your focus there, then does it matter that they're in that?
Well, no. And it doesn't mean that we can't get along. It doesn't mean that we can't play sports together. It doesn't mean that we can't talk about politics together. It doesn't mean any of that. But we do limit our relationship with people that don't have any agreement with us on our own personal levels. And so with a limited relationship, yeah, that's great. We have to limit it. And there's sometimes when somebody is a fanatical about whether their belief system or their just beliefs in general, right? If they're fanatical about, oh, well, no, this prime minister is the best prime minister, and if you don't agree with me, you're awful, right? If you're talking about people that are fanatical, I can go, I totally get where you're coming from because I can look at it from your perspective and go, well, I can understand how you get there, right? I don't agree with you, and that's okay, but I'm not going to hang out with you because it does not help me grow, right? It's not, and nor am I going to help you grow into this. I'm not going to try and convince you of something, right? That's not my job.
Maybe they don't even want to grow.
Of course.
That bingo, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've got a friend of mine.
Goes back to self-awareness too, right?
Exactly.
My friend believes in God. I don't. Mm-hmm. And we're still the best of friends, and we connect on such a deep emotional level. Mm-hmm. And I learn, and I think she listens to me on my beliefs, or I question everything though. Like, I don't think that what I believe is like, well, that's the way, right? Like, I think it's ever evolving.
Well, it's the way for now, right?
Yeah. And it's like, and I'll always take what she has to say and go, that's really interesting. I never thought of it that way. And I'll explore my feelings on that, or how I react to that, or if I have a negative reaction, which I don't, but.
Well, I mean, and people's belief systems affect relationships depending on what's going on, and what the subtext is or anything. I've certainly got a Christian friend of mine that has some definite opinions, but he really works at moving past them so that we can still spend time together, right? But coming from whatever any kind of religious. Not religious, rigorous is what I meant to say. When you come from any kind of rigorous and permanently held belief, you tend to judge people from that belief. You tend to judge and condemn people from that belief, whether you like it or not. And so there is always going to be problems when you're dealing with other people because we all view the world differently. So like somebody says, well, like you shouldn't be grieving over your cat, because that person.
Because they don't have an attachment.
Well, they don't have an attachment, but maybe they were raised on a farm where cats were just, they were rat catchers. That's all they did. Yeah, they were kind of cute and stuff, but when they're not useful anymore, we can we just put them down. I
find people that think very clinically, I guess, is like even when you're looking at people who die of the flu every year, right? And it's like. Then it's like, oh, you're a stat, and you take the emotion away from it and you turn it into, oh, it's statistics. These are just facts. So,
well, and the opposite end of that too is taking it too personally. we're sitting here in this balance of grief. Like, you take a look at the way that you grieve the people and the way that I grieve. They're completely different, right? I'm more clinical. If you actually want to get down to it, I'm more clinical about it than you are, because I don't emotionally attach as much. Now, there is that other possibility, the other direction of it is attaching too much, making everybody that dies of the flu your own personal vendetta, or you attach to, oh, millions of people are dying of the flu, right? There's a balance between the two that we're really working at trying to be able to get there, so that we're not overwhelmed by the world, but we're not underwhelmed by it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the same thing goes with, when you're grieving, and the way that you process your grief, and allowing other people their process of their own grief, understanding that we're all extremes to one degree or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
One of the things that I was taught, I ended up, this ties into gratitude, I think, when we approach things. And I want to kind of share this story, because it's when I go into a situation and that I've never been in before. I had a lady that used to come to one of my karaoke shows, ended up having a heart attack in Mexico and dying. I learned about it a number of days after it happened. And, like, we weren't connected really that well, but she had talked to me personally, and we had connected at least to what the problems that she was having in her life. Her husband gave me a call and said, listen, I don't want anybody else to talk at her funeral. I just want one person. Would you be that person? And which is quite interesting to me. Like, I mean, I've had a conversation or two with him, and he's a really smart guy. He's a dentist. And I said, I would absolutely be honored. I said, but I want to talk to you first, right? I really want to talk to you and find out how you feel that you want this to go. And so we agreed. We went in and we talked. And I said right up front, I said, listen, I understand in my life, I've accepted in my life that death is just a part of where we're at. I know that it can be hurtful, and I know that all of the stuff that goes along with this, but I want to be right up front. Said that even though I'm not devastated by what's going on, I understand that all of the stuff that we go through, but this is where I'm coming from. So we talked about death. I didn't go, oh, I'm so sorry for you, like we were talking about earlier, right? First off, I came with a tremendous amount of gratitude that somebody would think of me to talk about their beloved spouse, right, at a funeral, and wanting only one person to talk about their wife, and it happened to be me. So I came in with this tremendous amount of gratitude of being granted the access, because this is a very vulnerable space. And we started talking about just death in general. We weren't tackling anything. I didn't have any agenda, but I needed to connect with this person. I needed to know where this person was at so that I could aptly represent his view and understanding, right?
Act accordingly. Yeah.
And I didn't have an agenda. I didn't know where it was going to go. I had no clue, right? I was going into a situation where I didn't know. Now, I trust myself in these situations because I know that I'm able to deal with it and be open and get that kind of connection going. So we talked, we cried, he opened up to me, and it's like, he said, it comes in waves. I can't, I can't control it. And 1 minute I'm fine, and the next I'm crying, and the next I want to die. It hurts so much, and I've thought about killing myself, and all of the things that come up with that. And it was never even a question with me that any of that stuff comes up. And I mean, I've had suicidal depression since I was a kid, so I really understand where those are coming from. But that he trusted me with this beautiful piece of information, understood that I wasn't going to condemn him for feeling the way that he was feeling, because I didn't have any of that in me. I really don't. I coming from gratitude, coming from that place of gratitude, really moves past a lot of the condemnational judgments of what should be, into this is what is. Where do we go now? And that he was able to open up and really talk about what was really going on, instead of having somebody placate him. Oh, I'm so sorry for you, and stuff like that. To be able to connect with somebody, to be able to trust and respect them, and come from a place of gratitude was so important. Now, he was stuck in his house. Like he didn't want to go anywhere, well, he ended up, there was a couple of friends of hers that had invited him to come over, and invited Talia and I to come over as well. And we went to this party, not expecting him to show up, but he showed up, right? After this, because he was able to vent and share and have somebody share the burden, he was able to come out to the party. I mean, he went home a little earlier, right? But it was always understandable. I was just amazed that he showed up, right? It's like,
yeah, and there were a couple moments where people were talking and he'd get a little misty-eyed and stuff. But...
Well, and I mean, being a man, he tried to cover that stuff up, but I've always accepted the fact that, it's like, we're in the space we're in. It's okay. Nothing wrong with it. And I ended up talking at the funeral, which was really cool. And
it made everybody cry too. We were all fine until Drew got
until I said to the last part of it. But it was honest, open, and understanding, and it's coming from that space of gratitude. I mean, I would never, ever in my life expect anybody to say, my wife just died. Drew, a man who he's met like twice, 3 times, right? I want you to speak at the funeral, right? I'm like, okay, where did that come from? And I'm extremely grateful that I was able to connect into that space, connect with this person, and share this person's grief in such a way that it didn't really involve him, but still was the essence of who he is and what was going on, and was able to capture the essence of the lady that died. It was a tremendous honor. And I think that when we come from a place of gratitude and come from the understanding that this is, when somebody is grieving, it is probably some of the most vulnerable places that they've ever been. And it hurts so much just to be touched in that area. And especially when we're talking about condemnational judgment, because we're so condemnational in our lives every day, it is really tough to trust people in that area. I think that it is important that we figure out how to come from a place of gratitude and acceptance of people to where they're at.
I always feel too that I always think, if I die, how do I want people to remember me? Like,
when you say that, I always picture you as going, right? And we're gonna edit that out, but well, yeah, there's that, but there's that attitude of
I do have.
But that's just because, and there's no condemnation from me at all on it at all, right? I think it's hilarious, and because I certainly want to do that a time or two in my life too, right? It's like, I mean, just for those people that don't know, Talia is my wife, so it's like, did I say that at the beginning? I'm not sure.
Does it matter?
I don't know. But
even, going back to Kazi and not to bring up
Cosmo's our cat.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
But
cat that died.
like, I know how much it hurts and how I deal, and this is just me, how I deal with grief is I look at the life that Kazi had with you two and the unconditional love that you all shared together. Like, does that not bring any peace knowing that he lived his life in the most loving place possible?
Yeah. Well, like after he died, I was on my phone constantly just looking at the old pictures. Oh, he was so cute there. He was so cute there. Ooh, that was before his tummy got floppy. I mean, it really did help. And I think that's why I only really cried for 3 days instead of like a month, because it was so unexpected when it happened. And being able to look back and see that, this kitty who was once feral,
yeah,
and
see, like,
who
look at the life you gave him. Like,
I picked him up from this random lady outside of a PetSmart in Washington who had one carrier of neutered cats, and I was like, wasn't even thinking of getting another cat. I rarely go to PetSmart to begin with. Slater just liked their catnip, so it was just a fluke that I was even there, and I stuck my fingers in that crate, and this little white rat of a cat, because he didn't have all of his markings at the time, just walks right up, rubs my fingers and goes meow, and I'm like, okay, you're the dude.
And that kind of goes back to the harsh grief that I had losing my dad at a young age, and now now I'm coming up 55, and I'm thinking, wow, I was actually really lucky that I had the dad that I had, and even if I only had him for 19 years, like, I'm way better off because of it. Well, that's just how I process too, right? Like, and we're talking like my losses happened like years, like, decades ago. So
right.
It's not fresh and raw at the moment.
Yeah. Well, it's like losing my grandpa at age 8. I only knew him for 8 years, but my dad had known him for 30 years. Yeah. 40 years. And every year on the anniversary of his birthday and when he died, I usually post a picture. And my dad never fails comments on Instagram. I miss him every day. And right? I know he does. I mean, his big story was the night before Grandpa died, because we lived in different towns, was he was down there and was like, okay, do I go see him tonight, or do I go home and make sure I can tuck me in to bed, And so he didn't stop and see his dad, and he came home, and then he tucked me into bed and all that. And then the next day, Grandpa had a massive heart attack. And every once in a while, Dad would tell that story, and it's like, what would he have told you? He would have told you to go home, tuck her into bed, give her a big kiss. He would never have been begrudging for that. And he goes, yeah, I know. I just really miss him.
Yeah. I understand that too. At the end of my mom's life, I was sleeping on the floor of the hospital, just listening to her breathe, because we knew it was going to happen any time. So I'd hear her take the biggest breath in, and then it felt like an eternity before she released it. And I was just like, oh my God. And I wasn't getting any sleep because I'd wake up all the time going, oh, is that it? Was that it? And the nurses finally said, look, like, you really need to go home, have a shower. I'm sure. Totally ready. Just have a bath and relax. Like, obviously I haven't slept in so long. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I just need to take care of myself for a moment. So I went home, had a bath, went to bed, and sure enough, 5 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from the hospital going, it's time. And I didn't make it back in time. So I didn't get to say goodbye. And I sort of like did have that guilt that I went home, right? But yeah, it's like, you don't, and then I honestly think, and you know, my friends and stuff would say that that's how she wanted it, right? Like, otherwise I think she would have passed while I was there. But I remember when we first went into palliative care, and all the drugs and stuff that she was on, she would like just sit and go, poor Kim, poor Kim, right? And I'd be like, Mom, I'm right here. And then she'd be like, oh. Like, we had some crazy conversations. Morphine's a hell of a drug, I know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that she didn't want me to see her die.
I think that there's a lot of people that deal with a lot of death find that it's when the people that they care about the most are out of the room, right?
Yeah.
Because on some level, I think that they're holding on for us because they don't want us to be sad. And it's just like finally when they feel that everybody's gone, oh, good, I can just be gone. Now, and having said that, that's just a summation, but it's statistically, I think that they find that people end up passing away when their loved ones are out of the room a lot. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I actually wanted to get into was, you know, when we were grieving, when we finally get to that place where we are in acceptance, right? Like what we talk about as the final stage. Because, like I said, I don't think grief ever really ends. I don't think mourning ever really ends. It just becomes a part of our life, and it becomes less prevalent, right? It's still there. It's still when I think about our cat Cosmo, even when I think about my mom, right? I go, yeah, I'm really grateful for all of the things that happened. And so at this point now, I think back, and there's still that part of me that goes, ah, right? But it's mostly gratitude, and I think completion is a really big thing. I remember when my dad died, and one of his friends said, you know, come to the cremation, right, where they push him in the oven. He says, I can't explain it. I do this with all my friends. If they die, I'm there at the cremation and I push them into the oven, right? He said, there's something that happens. I can't tell you what it is. And I'm like, my sister couldn't do it. She's like, no, there's no way I can do it, right? And I just went, okay. And me being the logical guy and as disconnected as I can be, because I think I cried for my dad for like 5 minutes. He really wasn't part of my life, like barely at all. I wanted him to be, but I let go of that too, right? A long time before that, and that forgiveness that we were talking about it. So we went there, and we pushed him into the oven, and it changed something, and I couldn't tell you what it was. But it was really, the best thing that I could say is it was a completion for me, right? And I think that a lot of the times, in order to be able to grieve properly, or in order to be able to move through the grief to a place where we are okay with moving forward in our lives, we're not as paralyzed emotionally, or we're not as scared, all of those things that come up when we're grieving, is we need to have a place where our mind, and it's not a completion, really. I'm just calling it that. It's really a finite statement of, yeah, it's closure. Yeah, basically, that's it. That's exactly what I was saying. It's closure upon that. I don't even like that term because well, the only reason that I don't like it is because the connotation is that I'm walling something off. That's not true. It's really an acceptance of
acceptance. Yeah.
I think it's that final acceptance of this has happened, and now I can move through. And it doesn't mean you're done grieving, right? Like I said, but it gets to that point where you've just reached the point where you can move your life forward and not feel stuck. And I think that that's what happened. Even though I wasn't close to my dad, when that happened, it released something, whether it was a deep psychological thing or a lot of that wanting desire that I had for the relationship that I would have liked to have had with him. I don't know what it was, but it really did free me from it. And I think that that freedom is what we're after when we, there's lots of us that would like to have a place to remember, right?
Mm.
Like a specific place. I've never needed a place, but I know that people accept and complete when they have a location that they can put that grief, right? A place that they can go back and revisit it. So, yeah, there's something to be said about what many call closure, but I think it's more of a freeing more than a closure, right? A freeing of something that we've been holding on to. We were able to let it move.
I had an interesting experience when my mom passed away, because I wasn't as close to my mom as I was my dad. My dad, I was very emotionally close to. I couldn't make a decision without running it by my dad first. Like, we talked about everything, whereas my mom was very standoffish. And based on how she was raised, which we never talked about, right? So it was like, yeah, very, very different. But I did find that when she died, I took it harder. And I wasn't expecting that. And it kind of took me aback in a way. I was like, wow, like I thought I was like, would have grieved. And I was angry at my mom for a long time, because when my dad was in the hospital and he passed away, I remember calling her going, well, he died. And her first words, well, you knew he would. And I was just like,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
Thanks for being there for me.
That's not what I was looking for from you, lady.
No. And I felt, 32 when my mom passed away. But it was like, it took me a while to figure it out, but it was like, now you're an orphan. You don't have any parents at 32. And I think that was like, I wasn't expecting, right? I wasn't expecting that emotion to come through. So it's wild how much you can learn, like being self-aware and seeing and observing and acknowledging like all those feelings, right? That one opened my eyes a lot. I was like, so I'm basically on my own now. And then that was the feeling, right? It was like, now if you screw up, Kim, you're on your own.
You can't
don't have
lean back
anybody
on
to
your
fall
parents,
back on.
right?
Yeah, you can't fall back on anyone. And it's a life-changing experience.
In not having an agenda of where this is going, we can be authentic with what we're talking about, and we open up the possibilities to revelations, right? Like, you'll say something that'll trigger something in me, and I'll go, aha. I love those aha moments on these shows because they're genuine. And that's all I'm after. I just want us to genuinely talk about stuff. Like, I mean, when I talked about death and I said suicide comes up with that, we need to talk about those things. Like you said in the beginning of the show, we need to talk about these things. These are really, really important topics. We really need to start to understand ourselves better and what's really happening, instead of covering them up and showing that wonderful face to people. It's like we need to be able to have a free space where we're open, which is why I think counseling, when you've lost something that's really, really valuable to you, when you've been bereft of something that you go into mourning and grieving over, that going to, whether it's counselor, whether it's a group therapy session, or so that you can be really authentic who you are and share those deep, dark feelings that show up. Because if you keep them in, that's all they do. They just keep eating at you.
Eat at you, for sure.
Yeah. And
it also, and this sounds crazy for me to put it in these terms, but it's a part of a community as well. You feel part of, like when you go to a group therapy or even therapy, it's like, you're not alone. Like, you're not the only person that's experienced this. And there are many that are in the same place, right? And that to me that's why I keep pushing, like, look for the help, because it's out there and there's a ton of free services. And if it's, like when it's my time, like I would definitely call on my death doulas,
Right.
or like to help me through that transitional phase, you know, even for me, but also for my family and my loved ones, right? Like, it's good to have somebody who's not in it that can make rational decisions and help people, right? And that's amazing.
Well, and
Yeah, after my grandma died, I joined a page. It's not a group; it's an actual public page on Facebook about grief. And I don't comment on there very often, but I go on and I read the stories,
right,
of their spouses, their children, their friends, sometimes their pets. Pets are more few and far between, but they do pop up. And it helps. So when something, yes, is relevant, then I will go on and share. But it does help, and it's good for people to see that no, you're not alone. And the lady who runs the page has she had lost her husband, and she has a book out, so she's, you know, definitely knows what she posts a lot of memes and quotes and stuff. But again, people take those to heart and they find those relevant. You know, some quote from, you know, doesn't matter who it's from, they can relate to. And they'll get that momentarily, even if it's just momentary feeling of relief, or that, wow, somebody understands me, somebody understands what I'm feeling, even if they themselves don't understand, because it's, you know, a spouse instead of a child, or vice versa. There's someone there who has felt something as deep as you.
Well, so. I think that you bring up a really good point, Kim, is in this day and age, to a great degree, we've lost our communities. One of the reasons why people involved in religion, there's a community that they can be a part of. And I think that in regular everyday life, we've lost a lot of that community. We don't know who our neighbors are, or if we do, it's just the neighbor there. We don't know people that are in our neighborhood, which was that kind of social support was really important to us for a long time as we were growing up as a people. And I think that we've lost a lot of that. And I think that finding community and being able to be authentic and have a community, I mean, that's the thing, is we're in so much deprecating, not only self-condemnation, but condemnation of everybody else around us, that we separate ourselves so badly. And when we run into something where we're grieving or mourning, and we need to be able to connect with people, and say we don't have a best friend that really gets us, right? And when you have a best friend that gets you, and I'm sure that everybody can relate, when you have somebody that really gets you, that just is not, there's no condemnation or judgment, there's just you're that, and I think you're crazy, but I love you anyway. That whole, but you don't have that with everybody. And so we have these facades that we put on for everybody else to say, you know, it's sort of like the guy thing, just walk it off, right? The truth is, well, it's like, but the truth is we hold that as a people. We don't want them to condemn us. And so we put on these faces and we put on all of this stuff, and we're not able to really connect with people and grieve in a proper way, because everybody will think we're weak, and we can't be weak in this society. And that is a big problem. And that's why I would say we really have to find those communities out there that can help us through these things. And a lot of the time we don't even know that we feel the way that we feel until we're broken open like this. And so it's super important to have community. Yeah.